Fair warning. I think I'm going to be using a few more naughty words than usual for this video. And if you can't understand why someone might do that under these circumstances, well, eh. But for everybody else, welcome to Meta Modern Radio. Initially, I didn't really have anything that interesting or unique to say about this whole Vox adpocalypse situation with Steven Crowder and Carlos Maza. And it just seemed to me like another one of those situations where, well, we keep getting harder and harder by YouTube, but it's been happening for years. And I guess we'll just wait and see what happens. Keep taking the until eventually the gets deep enough that everybody kind of snaps into awareness and it triggers a sort of mass exodus. And so that's what I thought. And then I had what I think is a really amazing idea of how more controversial YouTubers could very easily get everybody to move over to another more open platform, like BitChute is sort of the one that I have in mind, that actually wouldn't take nearly as much like heavy commitment and collective organizing as you might expect something like that to have, and really takes advantage of the inherent appeal of an open platform, which I really know that almost everybody would prefer that YouTube was that. And so that's what I want to cover in this video. Recognizing that obviously I'm a really small YouTuber, I don't really have the authority or the will to place myself up as a kind of like commanding leader in front of everybody. It's just what I think is a incredibly high quality strategy. I'm going to start doing it, and I think that if enough controversial YouTubers started doing this, it would naturally cause a huge proportion, maybe even a majority of the YouTube audience to move over to BitChute or something like that if something better comes up in the future. And you'll understand why in the course of the video. But first I want to really stress that this isn't just an issue about politics or even right-wing politics as much as it is about culture in the most broad sense when you really get to the bottom of it. And you know this because the things that Steven Crowder was getting taken down for had nothing to do with politics, at least on the surface. It was all it was politically incorrect jokes, and it was an issue of what are you or are you not allowed to joke about. I really feel like we've lost our way and forgotten who we are, Since when is calling somebody a or having a socialism is for shirt that intensely offensive? We used to be South Park fans and this kind of stuff. We understood the difference between jokes and genuinely hateful rhetoric, and have allowed these like whiny on the internet to just pretend that there's no such thing as a joke anymore. This is a cultural problem, Almost everybody has either made jokes of that nature or knows personally at least one person who makes jokes like that, who they know perfectly well to be good people. And so we're really in a state of moral confusion here, and it's a very bad idea to let YouTube sort of push the conversation, subtly in that direction as they do. Before I go on to the strategy, I've got a couple more things to say, and I want to show this clip from Naval Ravikant on Joe Rogan's podcast, which really nailed home the intense importance of this to me.
I do think the extreme power, the most powerful people in the world today, and this is not well known, but the most powerful people in the world today are the people who are writing the algorithms for Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, because they're controlling the spread of information. They're literally rewriting people's brains. They're programming the culture, and they're doing it very subtly. Like Google, I believe that one of their execs got up in front of Congress, and the congressman asked him, do you manipulate search results? And he said, no, we do not manipulate search results. Really? That's your job. That is literally all Google does. Google has one job, which is to manipulate search results, to pull them out of the noise and rank them properly. And the precise algorithms of how they do that is very hidden, very complex, but influences the hearts and minds of everybody, including all the voters. And if you just see where these companies are headquartered in Silicon Valley, all the censors, and that's really what they are. They're censors working inside these companies. They're called by different names, obviously, right? It's doublespeak. You call it the Department of Defense when it's the Department of War. So in this case, the Department of Safety and Trust, when really it's the Department of Censorship. The censors are inside Silicon Valley, so it's going to reflect Silicon Valley's politics.
And this is how they do it. This is from their previous YouTube creator blogs. So they want to reduce the spread of content that comes close to but does not quite cross the line of violating their community standards. And in so doing, they're going to be reducing recommendations of borderline content. And this really is representative of the worst of political correctness overall. Because it's not just that there's a specific line that you can't cross, it's that you continually feel like you're not really sure if you're on the line or not, and so you just self-censor all the time. We see examples of people who cross the line and get pilloried, and we think that that's the main narrative of how this is happening, but the true story of it is all the hundreds and thousands of times where people would have said something if only they weren't a little bit suspicious that there was a line that they might cross there. And so the other thing is that because of the fact that you grow your channel through exponential growth, views beget views essentially, and this is true with regards to videos going viral or with regards to the building of your audience. So even if they only reduce recommendations of your content by like 25%, which they're likely to reduce them by more, and you still wouldn't really have proof or notice, even if they do that like 25-30% reduction, because it's compound interest exponentially over time, that could mean that after 2 years, you're going to end up with a half or even a third or a quarter of the audience growth that you would have had if they weren't subtly interfering for rule violations that you were never aware of and didn't know about, and through downranking practices that you could not have known about. So then they say, such as videos promoting phony miracle cures or flat earth or 9/11 conspiracy theories. And that is just complete. And you know how I know it's complete? Because there is no media agitation about flat earth, 9/11 truth, and phony miracle cures. Nobody cares, and nobody's bothering YouTube about it. More like it's kind of fun to watch flat earth videos on YouTube. So if you think that they're not talking about politics that elude the narrative and, fun, edgy comedy like PewDiePie or Keemstar or whatever, if you don't realize that, because of course that's what all the media agitation is about, and we know that YouTube basically just responds to media agitation. If you really believe that, this is kind of one of those situations where it's fool me once, shame on me, fool me 50 times already, I'm a. And they also say in the more recent blog post that they'll simultaneously be promoting more authoritative content, which of course mostly means traditional media sources. And so the traditional media on YouTube on the creators, YouTube responds by on their creators and giving all this nice stuff to the traditional media. And then they say that this borderline content views from recommendations has dropped by 50% already since January 25th. And of course, this started in January 25th. And so because of the way in which small reductions in recommendations can create massive exponential knock-on effects, we know that if YouTube wants to fundamentally change the culture on their platform, and even the world, they don't actually ever have to deliver that kind of cataclysmic last straw event that we've all been waiting for that will off enough people at the same time to actually cause us to collectivize. And so it seems so to me that if we've all known for a long time that we'll have to leave YouTube, why have we left this most fundamental responsibility in YouTube's hands? And the thing is, YouTube actually knows this. And so they'll never deliver us that collectivizing incentive. And all the while, my edgy brothers, we'll just see our reach and influence slowly dwindle over time. And so I guess the one thing that nobody ever really considered is, what if we just give YouTube exactly what they want?
Yeah, it's rewind time.
Yeah. Why does Will Smith sound like a sheep? Because of YouTube Rewind 2018, we actually know what this ideal YouTuber or ideal citizen that YouTube is trying to turn everybody into actually looks like. And furthermore, the interesting and privileged position is that we know that that is insanely unpalatable to most people. Even Susan Wojcicki's kids, the CEO, told her that it was cringe. So the bizarre and hilarious irony is that the worst thing that could actually happen to the YouTube corporation is that people actually start listening and try to become this ideal YouTuber that they're shooting for. And so why don't we just give them the clean and family-friendly platform that they're asking for? And so you probably noticed by now that I've censored literally everything even remotely controversial that I've said and placed a BitChute logo over my so that people watching it can know that there's a uncensored version of this on BitChute that they can go and find. And so this is how, if controversial creators just stop worrying about whether you're breaking the rules or not, make content as though it was the perfect free platform that you want, and then when you're editing it, just bleep over the things that you think might not work on YouTube, and then just put the uncensored version of it on BitChute. And so rather than everybody having to move over to BitChute simultaneously, we can just sort of send our audience there because they'll want to see the uncensored version of things that we're saying. The only issue there is that YouTube does track watch time in its algorithms. So if you're a viewer and you do that, then you want to video and then punish it in the algorithm. So the idea is you can essentially decide how committed you are to it, how controversial you are, how much you censor yourself. You can go overboard with the censorship. You might want to censor whole ideas if you're saying something that is controversial as like a broader political statement, so you could censor whole sentences and so on. Whatever it is, obviously the more it's censored, the more kind of curious people will be to wonder what the person's actually saying. And so you can use these different strategies to drive people towards BitChute. And obviously you can use them less or more, and it's all up to your level of commitment or interest. But that's the idea, and the more people commit to it, obviously the more effective it'll be. So the big question is, if you're a controversial political commentator, or comedian, or interviewer, or whatever you do, how much of a hit to your overall audience would you be willing to stomach just to be assured that you could always say whatever you wanted to and never be worried that you'd lose your platform? And when I say that, you really can say whatever you want to on BitChute. Just watch. So if I had to guess, I'd say that sort of inflection point is around 25%. I think there's enough people with that level of a need to be able to freely express themselves that they'd be taking that kind of hit. But definitely, if this ever gets around to any other YouTubers, let me know and let other people know what you think your kind of like cutoff point would be is. But the idea is that once you get about 25% of the general audience for different kinds of controversial content over to BitChute, then you kind of create a chain reaction which will inevitably bring everybody over. So the first thing that we're aiming at is to just get like 25% of the viewers of controversial content to go over and start using BitChute. And the way we do that is by using this bleeping method that I've talked about. So once you hit about that 25% mark for moving the audience, it kind of becomes inevitable that more and more creators will start moving, and then eventually the entire ecosystem of anything vaguely controversial will move over to BitChute from YouTube. So once you hit about that 25% mark for audience migration, then it kind of becomes inevitable that the vast majority of the vaguely controversial YouTube ecosystem will make that move over to BitChute, as the cost for getting that level of freedom that all controversial creators want becomes lower and lower. And then you really hit that magic moment, which I call the YouTube rewind moment, which is where YouTube actually does become the YouTube of YouTube Rewind.
If I control Rewind, I would want Fortnite and Marquez Brownlee.
Quiero a Liza.
There's one thing this video needs.
K-pop!
Oh, Casey, why?
Rewind needs more science. Could we do an experiment?
Love that. Melting lipsticks.
Oh. Yeah, you get the point. And I'm not trying to or bully the ad-friendly kind of normie creators, except for John Oliver and Trevor Noah, man. Those guys. The point isn't that non-controversial people are cringe in of themselves. It's that an ecosystem that has been cleansed of all things controversial as a whole is really awful and something that nobody wants. Like, I remember in high school, almost everybody really loved Family Guy. Like, even the most normie of normies thought Family Guy was a hilarious show, and they'd love, putting it on school trips or when you're at friends' houses and so on. And Family Guy was really, they made lots of jokes, lots of jokes about. They basically touched all the controversial things they could, and yet the sort of normie people who like to watch it would then just go back to their normal lives where they were, they wouldn't make those same kinds of jokes on their own. The thing is that what it means to be controversial is that you're sitting on the boundaries of acceptability, and the boundary of acceptability is always the site of the most rapid and significant cultural transformations. And so what that means is that controversial things always are and always will be congenitally incredibly interesting to people. And so if you remove that spice, it's a very strange thing, YouTube Rewind, it includes a lot of really prominent creators, Liza Cozy, James Charles, all these kinds of people that are extremely popular. And yet, when you remove the people who are somewhat or very controversial, the absence is incredibly conspicuous. And so you could sort of theorize about why it is that things need to be controversial and so on, and I think that's really important. But the YouTube Rewind failure phenomenon really shows us empirically, beyond the point where we even need to convince ourselves, that the removal of controversial things will cause the collapse of YouTube. And so if we can get all of the controversial creators to leave YouTube, then everybody else will follow suit. And it's necessary and inevitable if they want to be where things are interesting. I think this is true for everybody, but especially with the younger generation, because they really grew up with the internet and being able to find out things for themselves in a way that other generations never really were able to, is that people really don't want to have it decided for them what they can and cannot watch. The funny thing is there's a fair amount of people who call for censorship, but I would be surprised if those people who called for censorship themselves would be okay with other people restricting what information they can and cannot access. I could probably ramble on forever about why I think the open internet is such an amazing thing, but I guess I'll just say that there's an aesthetic of freedom, which is really what I think is the best thing about the American identity, although I'm not American. And although some people are losing faith in that these days, I think it's undeniable that there's nothing more gripping and interesting than the idea that you can access whatever media you want when you go on the internet, and nobody is there to filter it or tell you what you can access. And the idea that YouTube thinks that they can replace that with you can see all of the things that we approve of with our politically correct sensitivities. The idea that they think they can do that and have that work as a long-term model is absolutely insane to me. And by the way, also, Keemstar, who has the kind of controversial Drama Alert channel, has been massively outspoken against Vox in this whole situation. And he has this tweet here, this string of tweets here. He says, "I spoke privately with over 100 of the biggest YouTubers over the last 48 hours, and we're prepared to fight back against the media websites that host articles that attempt to get advertisers to stop running ads on YouTube. Our plan is simple. Convince advertisers not to run ads with you." Now, that, in my opinion, is a amazing idea, because I've been watching these deplatforming things go on for a really long time, and it is invariably, every single time, it is some kind of dossier of controversial remarks created by an activist journalist sent to a platform to get them removed. I don't think I've ever seen somebody get deplatformed by any other means. So this is really amazing, because enough really popular YouTubers could get together and they could really convince kids that, and me, frankly, that almost any brand is the brand of baby boomers who hate the internet. So it's a really good idea for big YouTubers to collectivize, because as an influential force overall, they are insanely influential. So I guess there's 4 ways this can go. The first is YouTube just finally chills out and stops seeing itself in the position of a censor, which I think is really unlikely, and you'd be stupid to rely on that just because of the way that they've demonstrated they're willing to operate and because of the way the politics in Silicon Valley work. The second would be we just get up and leave YouTube already, which ordinarily would be very difficult, but I think this idea that I brought up is actually a pretty good way of doing it that has a good chance of working with not too much upfront risk and investment. The third is massive government regulation, which I see as a not a bad or maybe even a good possibility coming up, because politicians are starting to get very frustrated with the way that Silicon Valley has been operating for a whole lot of reasons. And then the final is this idea of collective bargaining. The first is convince advertisers to nuke companies like Vox that come after YouTubers and solve that problem for good. But the big issue there is, as I was talking about earlier in this video, the tools that YouTube has to censor people and control their social network are insanely powerful, and they can use them in ways that are virtually indetectable. So it's not enough just to negotiate against these advertisers. It's also necessary to negotiate with YouTube, because you need to be able to make them set up the platform in such a way that you know that they're not doing any and so in order to be able to collectively bargain with YouTube, you need to be able to demonstrate that you're actually able to lead people off the platform. And so you still need some kind of strategy for leaving YouTube, even if you want to stay and bargain with them. And so even if you're going to stay, I think it's a really good idea to try doing something like what I'm sort of proposing here. I guess that's all I want to say. Well, thanks a lot for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you know any creators, please forward this to them. And if you are a creator, definitely let me know what you think and show it to anybody else you think would be interested in this, because I think this is a really important time for YouTube people and anybody interested in freedom on the internet. So yeah, I mean, I'm not an authority here. I'm not trying to tell anybody what to do. This is what I think is a really high quality strategy that would really work if enough people went in with it. And that the nice thing about it is, again, it doesn't require everybody to go all in with it right away. It's a nice sort of thing that could easily snowball. You can imagine how after a while people would get familiar with seeing, bleeped out things on YouTube like this and knowing, oh yeah, okay, so I'll go find it on BitChute or whatever it is. And of course, I'm going to continue trying to employ this strategy to get people over to BitChute and familiarized with it. So I guess the last thing is, overall, with all of these demonetizations going around like crazy, it's a really up time for creators, and the platform's feeling, less and less stable by the month. So now is really the time, I think, if you like independent media and if you like things that kind of elude the narrative, to really put your money where your mouth is with regards to it. I happen to have a Subscribestar and Patreon, and I would appreciate any support I get there. But more importantly, if there's people who you follow a lot who you think are really important voices, then definitely support them, because somebody's got to. It's not necessarily going to be reliably always coming from YouTube or any mainstream sources. So if you really like something, you gotta put something up for it. And yeah, so thanks a lot, guys, and peace out. Oh, and subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on BitChute. I got more on the way.